There is one characteristic about fallen mankind, and that is that fallen mankind will not put up with anything that doesn't provide them short-term relief. It doesn't have to benefit them in the long run. As long as they can get some short-term reward out of it, people will put up with it, no matter how harmful or dishonorable it is. Psychologists know this. The world leaders know this. That is why, to cover up wrongdoing, they always come with some story that triggers people's need to belong. It goes like this. All evil that happens on the earth only happens because there are expectations that people don't want to give up. So the agenda is to preserve the expectation. Preserving the expectation becomes a virtue. So anything that enables the agenda is welcomed and praised. Anything that challenges the agenda is frowned upon and in worst cases punished. So, if for example, there is discrimination going on or racism in a country in which are minorities exploited and harmed, why does this happen? Well, there's discrimination, racism going on, we know that, but why does it happen? What's behind it? Because there is the expectation that if you work hard enough, life will work out well for you, which is a false expectation that isn't true, but this is the expectation that people are conditioned into by society. So, to give value and realness to this expectation, they need to have a bad example to scare them off. And that minority that's discriminated against, that's in poverty, that's on welfare, or that face a lot of violent crime, they serve as the stick to push the people into hard work. That is the social function of the violence against that minority. And the commoners of that community that don't belong to the minority, they hold on to this idea of hard work, and because of that, they don't want to challenge the fact that there's racism and discrimination going on. Because they need to recognize, okay, if that's going on, that means that it does depend on hard work, because that means you need to be offered a chance. So if you need to be offered a chance, then your hard work doesn't even matter. It depends on who gives you the chance. So this whole idea of them being able to control their whole lives falls apart. With everything they've invested in this idea of hard work. So will they welcome any reality or any fact that will challenge whatever they invested everything into? No, they will not. So the evil in that community continues against the minority because people don't want to give up the false god of hard work. So preserving the expectation is the agenda. That's one example. It can be that in a neighborhood there is a woman who is quite loud and she's drinking a lot. And she causes problems in the streets every weekend. So after a while, the people were fed up with it, but they couldn't kick her out of the community. Why? Because when she was growing up, she had an alcoholic father in the household that was very abusive, and the people around knew it, but they didn't do anything about it. So the people enabled harm in the household by not intervening. And now this woman grew up becoming dysfunctional. If they would turn on her for her being dysfunctional, she could always remind them of the fact that they neglected her. And that will be a fact. And then the people need to account for themselves and they're not able to do it. So they don't want to face this embarrassment. So kicking her out of the community is not going to work. So what do they do next? One day, this woman falls in love with a guy, and she's totally into the guy, and she forgets about drinking every weekend and all of that. So now she marries the guy very quickly, and she now blames everything on the guy. She's toxic, and she's blamed the guy for everything in her life. Now, after 5 years of marriage, the guy is considering a divorce. Now, the people of the woman's background suddenly appear inside telling him, don't divorce her, man, just work hard on your marriage. They say she's a lovely woman, she has some issues, but you can work it out. What's going on? Why are they so interested in him remaining married to her? Why? Because before she was married, the community had to deal with the weight of her toxicity. After she got married, the husband became the target of her weight. So if she divorces the man, or if the man puts her away, now the community will become the target again. And right, I'm not saying she should target the community, she should look for help, but the community enabled the toxicity in her by not intervening when she needed it, when she was little. So if the community now is targeted with the weight, well, they brought it on themselves. Not that it's a good situation that I approve of, but you get what I'm saying here. So the community had relief for 5 years already from having to face the consequences of their neglect, because she became toxic due to their neglect. So because they don't want to face their neglect, they now don't want her to divorce. So their interest in keeping this man in a toxic marriage is to relieve themselves from having to face their own toxicity. So whenever there's evil going on anywhere on the earth, there is an expectation somewhere that people are holding on to that they cannot account for. That's all evil is. Preserving an expectation that goes against Christ. And in this world, there are many of such expectations that people preserve. And that they don't want to be challenged. That is why anytime there's some bad thing going on, ask yourself, what is the agenda? Now you know the agenda is to preserve an expectation. So you go to the next question, the root question. What is the expectation? Someone or a group of people want something they shouldn't want. And because they don't want to face the fact that they shouldn't want that thing or that outcome, now they enable violence or they use violence so that they are not challenged. Ask yourself, what is the expectation people are holding on to? Once you ask this question, you'll be able to see things far better. Challenge the expectation and you know what's going on. For example, it can be that just an example, you have a neighbor somewhere and nobody in the neighborhood can stand him. Everyone's upset with him. And then you begin to think, hold on a minute. Does he have a record? Is he involved in criminal activity? Is he in indecent behavior, like showing his genitals publicly or whatever? You begin to think, what's going on that people can't stand this guy? But then you ask the question, okay, what do people really want? And then you figure it out very quickly. This guy doesn't work full time, yet he's able to pay rent and live his life at ease. And all the other people are toiling from 9 to 5, and many of them still have a hard time making it at the end of the month. So the expectation is that they embrace a type of slavery as a natural outcome, even though it's not a natural outcome, and this decision of theirs cannot be accounted for. But if everyone around them agrees with the expectation, then they don't have to challenge themselves, they don't have to face themselves. But now that they have someone around them who does not get along with the curse, now all the weight of the curse they put on him. So now you know what's going on. People want to preserve an expectation that they cannot account for. And now, to put attention on a target, they now blame him. That is why, whenever people are upset with you, look at the context. Because one thing I've noticed about people, often the reason why they're upset is not really the reason. Most of the time, the reason is control. They want control. And for some reason, you violate their expectation of being in control. That's why now they're using emotional or sometimes physical violence on you to force you in line with their desire for control. But they won't come to you and only say, I want control. And I can't control you. So allow me to control you so that I'm at ease, or else. They won't say that to you because that sounds very stupid. And if they would say something like that, everyone around would look, what? So they would come and say, you're so rude, you talk too much, or they will come with some type of accusation to trick you into a state of anxiety, because in a state of anxiety, they can easily harm you with violence. And that's where they want you, so they can have a grip on you. They will not come and only say that they want control. They may hint to it by using some world entitlement as an excuse, saying, this is my house, I pay rent, so what they're actually saying is, I want control over here. Worldly people seldom tell you what they really want, because what they really want cannot be accounted for. Control. But that's what it's all about with them. Control. Many of the social ills that afflict many people in daily life can easily be resolved, but they're not resolved because if they're resolved, people will need to find another way to live with one another instead of relying on narcissistic relief. And because people are not willing to look for constructive ways to relate to one another, they will fight anything that will hinder their narcissistic relief. That's why you have poverty. Poverty is an issue that can be resolved within a day, humanly speaking. Why is it resolved? Because the poverty, that means the disadvantage of some, gives relief to others. And it's this relief that society depends on. So, resolve poverty and there's no narcissistic relief anymore. And without narcissistic relief, people will turn on one another. And this is what the world leaders don't want. This is what commoners don't want to face, how fallen they really are. So, by having the haves not, or the unfortunate people amongst them, they are at ease. Look at the expectation. Then you'll see what is going on. Agree with Christ.